Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of Coffee, the Bible, and Paige. I am Paige, your caffeine-imbued host. Here's my caffeine. In the beginning, coffee, and lo, it was very good. Well, today we continue on with our Christmas theme. This week's essay I have titled The Incarnation, but it's really about Mary. More about Mary than the birth of Jesus. And I know that Jesus is the central point of it all. But gosh, Mary is a hero of mine. I think you're going to understand why here in a little bit. So let's get started. To really understand Mary's story, we have to begin here. In Matthew chapter 1, we read, "Now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child." Now, just picture the scene. Mary is in her home in Nazareth when an angel, no ordinary angel, this one is Gabriel himself, appears, an archangel. By the customs of the time, Mary was likely only 14 to 16, maybe even a little younger, but not much. I would think around 14, 15 years old. Now, pause for a moment and set aside the wonder of the angelic visitation, which is what we always see in our church pageants. And it's an incredible part of the story. But consider instead the humanity of Mary's situation. As a father and a husband and a teacher of teenagers, I cannot help but imagine the weight of that moment. After Gabriel departs, I picture Mary sitting down all of a sudden on the edge of her bed, stunned. She's pregnant. Joseph is not the father. And she lives in a culture where adultery could bring the death penalty by stoning. And there's a point here that I haven't put in my writings, but which I always circle my wagons around. When Gabriel told her that she had caught God's attention and told her what was going to happen, she immediately accepted it. "May it be done unto me, as you say." And she had to have known what that choice that she made would engender as far as repercussions. So keep that thought in mind. If this happened today, I can almost imagine the scene at home. A 14 or 15-year-old girl discovers she's pregnant. Who does she tell? Likely not her father. I'm a father, and I have a daughter. My first reaction might not have been a very calm one. If my 14-year-old daughter had come to me and said she was pregnant. Maybe her mother? Could she go to her mother? Perhaps. Or maybe another trusted woman. In my experience, when a young woman faces trauma, she often seeks out the company of another woman who can understand her dilemma, whatever that dilemma is. Well, that's exactly what Mary appears to do. She runs to her older relative, Elizabeth, who herself is experiencing a miracle pregnancy. If anyone could understand the angelic visitation experience, it's Elizabeth. Mary needed a confidant. She needed someone to assure her that she wasn't imagining things, someone who could share her fear, confusion, and awe. So Mary stayed with Elizabeth for 3 months and returned home after Elizabeth's son was born. And imagine her walking through the front door. I can just imagine her mother and father waiting to get news of Elizabeth and the new baby, and their daughter walks through the door visibly pregnant after having left 3 months earlier. And this raises a very painful thought, at least to me as a father. What would her family have thought? Imagine the scene. She returns home. She walks through the door to a family expecting news about their relative, Elizabeth, and her new child, and they see Mary with a baby bump. If I were her father, my first question would have been, I'm sure what yours would have been, who is the Father? Now, herein lies the dilemma of Mary. What could she say? That the Father was God? After 4 centuries of divine silence? No prophet to confirm her claim? No angelic visitations? God's been quiet for 400 years. Her options are few. Tell the truth, which no one would believe. Say nothing and let rumors run wild. Or she could lie, which, given her integrity, as spoken of by the angel Gabriel, that seems unthinkable to me. So that leaves her one choice, really. Say nothing. Either way, though, Mary's reputation was destroyed and her future was uncertain. As her betrothed, Joseph now held her fate in his hands. Now, enter Joseph. What about Joseph? Well, he had likely spent months preparing their home, as was the custom. But when he discovered her condition, Matthew tells us that he was a just man. He was a good man, unwilling to disgrace her publicly. Still, he planned to divorce her quietly until Gabriel intervened. Only after the angel's reassurance did Joseph take Mary as his wife. Now, Mary had her dilemma about what she could tell about what happened to her. Well, Joseph has his dilemma. Why is he taking on a wife who's carrying the son from someone else? Well, we know the answer. God had intervened and spoken to him directly, and Joseph was a just man. He obeyed God. But by doing so, he took on himself her shame. Her shame became his shame. Perhaps this explains why we don't read much about Joseph's family or Mary's family in the narrative. Maybe they just didn't want much to do with her. Which leads us to the Bethlehem journey. All right, why then did Joseph take Mary when she was 9 months pregnant on a journey to Bethlehem? Well, this journey would take roughly 4 to 7 days on foot, depending on weather, terrain, and pace, especially considering Mary's advanced condition when she and Joseph traveled for the census. This is a good question to ask. Alfred Edersheim, a 19th century author of the book The Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah, notes that she was not required to go. Joseph could have registered for the entire family. But perhaps Joseph understood that leaving Mary behind meant leaving her vulnerable to the scorn of both families. Maybe he thought it safer for her to be with him, even on a perilous journey, than to endure the gossip and the rejection at home. Remember, in that culture of the time, when Joseph brought Mary home, he brought shame into his parents' house. And since Mary was now part of his family, I can imagine his reluctance to leave his pregnant bride under the care of a shamed mother-in-law. And for the record, in a couple instances I've read of historians from that time, other people who were writing, the common consensus was that Jesus was the illegitimate son of Mary's liaison with a Roman soldier. That was a rumor that went around. That's how the world explained what happened. She lived with that her entire life. Jesus would have lived with that his entire life. Joseph would have lived with that his entire life. And Joseph brought that on himself voluntarily. Joseph is a stand-up guy. And that's why I believe he brought Mary on the trip to Bethlehem. He did not want to leave her alone outside of his protection. Now, this brings me to one of the most troubling questions of the whole story. Why was there no room for them in Bethlehem? The simple answer is, and we see it in every church pageant, there was no room at the inn. And in most church pageants, we have the innkeeper guiding them to a stable where she could give birth. That answer doesn't satisfy me. In that culture, family was everything. Hospitality was not optional. It was expected. Bethlehem was Joseph and Mary's ancestral home. Surely some relative lived nearby. Why then was no room found for a young woman about to give birth? Am I to understand that there was nowhere for a young, pregnant, teenage woman to lie down? Even if it was just a mat on the floor in front of the fire, surely some place could have been found for her. But there wasn't. Consider the possibility. Mary's shame had followed them. She returned from Elizabeth's house 3 months pregnant. 6 months later, she and Joseph arrive in Bethlehem, married. There would have been ample time for the word of her condition to spread. Could it be that the lack of lodging was not only due to crowded inns, but also due to quiet rejection? A refusal of family hospitality because of perceived disgrace? I know this is conjecture. I admit that. But my imagination cannot help but fill in the silence of Scripture. Man's nature has never changed from the very beginning. And this is how people respond. And while we cannot say with certainty, I don't believe it's far-fetched to think that gossip, shame, and rejection may have played a role in pushing Mary and Joseph out of the homes of their family and into the shelter of a stable. It would also explain the disdain that Jesus would have dealt with as a reported illegitimate son of Mary and another man other than Joseph. This drama doesn't stop here. Joseph and Mary stay in Bethlehem for approximately 2 more years before leaving. We'll cover that in more detail when we discuss the Magi's arrival, but it does add to the narrative that we've been discussing here. Why didn't they immediately return home after Joseph finished registering them in the census? My thoughts stick to this idea that the shame surrounding Mary, Joseph, and Jesus was not conducive to returning to Nazareth and a normal life. I believe Joseph was protecting Mary and Jesus. He was doing what a husband and a father does to protect his wife and child. They stayed in Bethlehem for at least 2 more years. Now, of course, we in hindsight understand that God kept them there in Bethlehem until the Magi would come, true. But God, I believe, used the circumstances of the shame thrust upon them to keep them there in Bethlehem. Hate to stop the story here, but I'm going to do that because the next podcast I'm going to do deals with the next scenes in this story where the shepherds show up, and you don't want to miss that one. All right. With my transcript, I have attached study questions. Questions like, how does the beginning of Mary's story in Matthew 1:18 shape our understanding of the human weight of her condition? What do you think Mary would have felt? If you're a woman, what would you have felt as a 14-year-old girl if Gabriel had showed up in your room and basically told you, by the way, you're pregnant? That's God's child you're carrying in your womb. And you lived in a society where that could invoke the death sentence, being pregnant without being married, or being pregnant by someone other than your betrothed or your husband. There's a lot to Mary's story to consider. All right, I think I'll stop right there. That's a good place. Here's my coffee. Is Mary your hero? She's mine. Have a glorious day. Bye-bye. I have begun to publish my Bible studies on Amazon, make them available on Amazon. And if you were to go to Amazon.com and type my name in the search bar in Amazon, Paige Garwood, you're going to see one of the books that I've got there. You're going to see, right, like for instance, the first one that shows up, Essays and Beatitudes. underneath it says part of. It's a series, part of a series of essays in. You click on that, and then you have the collection of books that I've got done so far. As you can see, I've got essays in Ruth, essays in Beatitudes, essays in Revelation, the 7 churches of Asia Minor, essays on Christmas, which is where this podcast comes from. Each one of these are based on the podcast series that I did related to this topic. And as you can see, some are available via Kindle, some are available only in print. I'm looking to fix all that, make sure everything's available in both types. But it's available there for you to purchase. And I've written them in 8.5 by 11 size notebooks, so there's room to write in because these are Bible studies. So feel free to go to Amazon.com and purchase these. You will be helping support me in my ongoing ministry with my Bible study writings that I'm doing, and I would be very grateful. If you wish to become a supporter of these Bible studies, then go to www.patreon.com/coffeeBiblePage. For $5 a month, you will get access to each and every transcript of every podcast I produced in the past and will produce in the future. And when I turn them into books, you will get access for no additional cost to the PDF version of those books. Also, don't forget to go to Facebook and do a search on Pages Bible Study Group. It's a private group, and if you promise to behave, I'll let you come in and chat with the rest of us where we discuss the different Bible studies I've done and the different Bible studies that are coming. Have a glorious and God-blessed day. Bye-bye.